Hello, and welcome to this special live broadcast for International Women's Day. It's great to see you here. I'm Anne, voice and personal growth coach and founder of Vocal Intuition. Today, we're looking at a topic that affects so many of us, the voice gap. Why women's voices are not truly heard. Now, I have been inspired with this title by Mary Ann Siegart's book, The Authority Gap. And if you haven't read it, please do. It's a wonderful book. And also Mary Gregory's book, Ego. As well as that, I've looked at a number of research papers, articles, and most importantly, I'm going to be speaking from my own and my clients' experiences. So, recognizing the gap in authority that exists as a result of long held biases against women, and not just by men, by the way, sometimes women are biased against other women. I'll be looking at voice in particular, therefore, the voice gap. I also just want to say that this is very inclusive. So it's for anyone who identifies as a woman or identifies in other ways and finds that they're not heard as well. But there will be certain biological things I'll need to talk about, and please assume then that I'm talking about biological female and biological male voices. So if you're out there listening, I'd love to hear from you. Say hello, drop me a comment or a question. I'm not sure I can see all the comments on this streamer, but I'll certainly get back to you later if that's the case. So let's think about why this even matters. Well, even in 2025, women's voices are often overlooked, interrupted, or even dismissed. And that's whether it's in business meetings, public speaking, or sometimes in everyday conversation. And today, we're not just talking about it, we're going to explore why this happens and, more importantly, what we can start to do about it. International Women's Day is a celebration and also an awareness-raising event about women and working for women's equality. So we need to be doing this all year round, but today is a great day to highlight it. Stay with me, don't forget to comment. So what is this voice gap? Well, let's define it. The voice gap isn't just about speaking volume or clarity. It's about how women's voices are perceived, received, and responded to in professional and social spaces. Now, studies show that women are interrupted over 30% more than men in conversations. When women speak with authority, they're perceived as bossy rather than confident. You know the old saying, the man is the boss, the woman's just bossy. It's true. If they speak softly or with emotional expression, they're sometimes infantilized or even dismissed. And women's voices are judged differently based on their tone, pitch, and even their accent, often leading to unfair biases. But here's the real issue. It's not just about how women speak, it's about how society listens, because a lot of these biases are ingrained, they're cultural, and they've gone on for years. Here's a very general overview in terms of the science and the biology and how our voices have evolved over the years. Well, first of all, biologically, male and female voices are shaped by different hormones, or I should say really different balances of hormones, because people's voices vary, don't they? And if you're someone who's transitioned to being a woman, then you'll be aware of how hormones are important. But if we're thinking about biologically female voices, people who are female at birth, then they will have more estrogen in the mix, whereas males will tend to have more testosterone in the mix. This influences the growth of the body, the growth and structure of our vocal cords, or folds as we call them, and this creates natural differences. And I'm speaking with a very large rule of thumb here, but men's voices we know tend to be lower due to this and due to longer, thicker vocal folds. And women's voices are naturally higher pitched. Their vocal folds are smaller and a bit thinner, and they tend to work them with a bit more flexibility in tone and resonance as a habit. Now, this isn't true of everyone in terms of how they use tone and resonance, but I'm just, as I said, giving a very broad brushstroke. If we go back through history, voices were used in different ways to serve survival needs. Men's deeper voices evolved to command attention, signal authority, and assert dominance in group settings, whether leading a hunt or defending a tribe, and also shouting at each other to keep in touch. And this might sound like I'm being awfully biased here and giving some sort of generalism, but it's the truth. It's how men's voices evolved from studies. And women's voices evolved for social bonding, soothing children, nurturing relationships, building community. It was very important in the early stages, and I'm going back eons here, for us to have communities and to feel that we belonged and that we were accepted. At the end of the day, if you were outside of the community, and banishment was one of the worst punishments, then you were more likely to die, basically. You could get attacked by a lion or a tiger, or be taken prisoner, or held as a slave, or killed, just generally. Now, it's not quite like that these days, but those evolutionary qualities, if you like, have remained. That was a bit of a garble, but it happens to all of us. Anyway, this is where the bias actually comes from in terms of voice to some extent. The issue is not that women's voices are less powerful, it's that we've been conditioned to believe that power must sound a certain way. But here's the truth. Your voice, whatever its pitch, tone, or style, deserves to be heard. The idea that power equals deep, booming voices is quite frankly outdated. And you might remember Margaret Thatcher, who famously lowered her voice from something that was a bit like this, lowered it so she could start to sound a bit more like a man. And actually, I think that was a huge mistake, because men don't respond well to that from women. It's just, in a sense, the way the programming goes. I'm not saying it's right, but at the time, she was often referred to as bossy, often referred to as, oh, she wears the trousers, doesn't she? All of that. I have no love for Margaret Thatcher, I'm afraid, but it's just an example to show you what I mean. So there's also how men and women phrase things differently, not just the structure of their vocal folds. Airflow and vocal onset. One of the key physiological differences in how men and women speak is the approach to airflow and vocal onset. That's the start of the tone, the onset. Men tend to use a firmer glottal onset, so their vocal folds come together more firmly. Again, it's not universal, it's a tendency. And this is at the start of a word, so that we get a sort of definite sound. If you say the word amazing, for instance, males will tend to use that A at the beginning of the word to go and say amazing if they're trying to make a point. A woman, on the other hand, might make the point in a slightly different way and do a smooth onset, something a little bit more expressive, perhaps softer, unless they've decided to do otherwise, obviously. But these are the defaults, if you like. Amazing. That was amazing, as opposed to that's amazing. Amazing. That's the glottal. And these are just patterns that have been studied and noticed. And it really depends on the context, obviously, and it depends on the individual. So I can't repeat enough times that I'm giving very broad brushstrokes, but they do matter. Men typically phrase things in shorter, more direct sentences, while women often phrase ideas collaboratively, using hedging language or rising intonation at the end of statements. So women are more likely to say, I think we should try this, whereas men might say, let's do this. And that gives you the example. Women are more often including variation in pitch, added expressiveness, which can be perceived as engaging if used right, but also can be thought of as less serious in professional settings. Does this mean that women should change the way they speak then? Should we all change it? Well, absolutely not, but rather learn to use our voices to effect. Awareness is power. By understanding the different speaking styles and how they're received, we can build the skills and confidence to adapt strategically without losing authenticity. So, what strategies then do we have? Here are some practical things. First of all, own your space. Consider the space your own and that you're worthy of being there and that you have something worthy to say. Speak with confidence born of that. Take your time and don't shrink within yourself. Sometimes people need help to do this. Use your full voice. I'm using mine now. It's strong and supported and hopefully commands attention if you can hear the difference. Build that skill and use it. It's not just light and conversational like this voice. It has a little bit more authority and emphasis about it, but I haven't lowered my voice artificially and I'm not trying to speak like a man. If you do get interruptions, and this happens to women a lot, as I've said, then handle them gracefully. Say, I haven't finished yet, or please let me continue, or simply keep on speaking with authority. There are lots of options. Again, it takes confidence and practice if you're not used to doing it. Challenge the biases. This is really important, and especially for today. If someone comments on your tone rather than your message, redirect the conversation. Let's focus on the content of what I'm saying, shall we? Let's think about the main points that I'm raising here. Direct it away from that criticism. And support other women. How often do we actually call people out for doing this and say, excuse me, I was really listening to what was being said and I'd like to hear the rest of it, if somebody is interrupted, whether that be by a man or a woman, to be honest. And to allow that woman to carry on speaking and to carry on making her point. What does that mean for workplace and society then? Well, listen actively. Now, that means really listen. Listen to what somebody is saying and also read between the lines a little bit. Be fully present with it rather than making judgments and just sort of hearing on the periphery. It's a real skill. But it really helps. To be honest, it also helps if you're someone who's inconfident in speaking. Listen to what people are saying. And if somebody does interrupt and say something, acknowledge it, say, thank you very much. That's a very interesting point. We'll come to it later. But for now, I'd like to carry on. Listening, really listening, is helpful in building engagement and crossing those bridges. Let's also challenge the stereotypes. Let's call out unfair judgments on voice and speech. I've talked about biologically male and female voices, and these can be the root of some of these biases. But also, people vary a lot and people have different voices. Sometimes men can have quite high voices, and especially as they get older, and sometimes women can have lower voices, again, especially as they get older. And that's because the estrogen and testosterone levels change and the hormone balances become a bit closer together. And so we need to listen to the person, not just the voice. Let's encourage diverse voices in leadership, whether that's women, trans women, or people who don't identify as women or identify as non-binary. Today is about women, so that's why I'm speaking about that. But everybody's voices matter. And here's this final thought. Your voice, your real, natural, authentic voice deserves to be heard. The way you speak should never define your worth. Confidence doesn't come from speaking louder, like I just did. It comes from knowing that you have the right to speak and believing that and putting that forward. So today, on International Women's Day, let's commit to making all voices heard, not just in our own conversations, but in boardrooms, on stages, across society. And now I know firsthand what it's like to feel unheard, to second guess your voice, and to worry about how you'll be perceived. That's why I created Be Truly Heard, a program designed to help women in business to find their true voice, to integrate it with their body and their mindset, their sense of self, and speak with power, confidence, and authority in their woman's voice. If you've ever felt overlooked, interrupted, or judged for your voice, this is the time to change that. Drop me a message or comment below, or visit Vocal Intuition to learn more about how we can work together and get you truly heard. Let's keep this conversation going. Share this live, tag a woman who inspires you, and let's close the voice gap together. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be looking at all your comments and questions later on. I really do appreciate your listening today. Let's go out there and be truly heard. Bye for now.